like we're kind of super tilted at the point, and Vici came at us with a passion to fuck us in the ass. Like they were killing us, and then just like Zoking was doing the Zoking thing. He was just standing on our bodies and spraying. After getting the first entry into B side on cash, just standing there and then spraying the guy's dead body. And I was like, what the fuck is going on? Like we didn't do shit, man. You guys are late. Admins decided to forfeit your map. It wasn't our choice or anything like that, right?
All right, well, this is In Retrospect with ImpressioN, who is, as many would know, an IGL and I would say a team captain as well from the Singapore region in Counter-Strike. Now, I don't think you normally classify players as quote-unquote captains, but I think at least as far as ImpressioN goes, he is someone that seems to have led teams quite a lot. He's obviously known for his time in BOOT Dreamscape, and obviously BOOT being two different teams, but also one team, and BTRG, and now obviously moving into that NG roster, which is sort of a new team within the Asian region who they haven't fully announced their whole roster, although a lot of us do seem to have our suspicions as to who might be on that roster. Anyway, I also would kind of want to throw in that I think that maybe ImpressioN, you might be Singapore's most successful CSGO player. I don't know if you would necessarily agree with that, but you certainly seem to have far-reaching implications, more so than some of the other Singaporean players. So would you agree with that statement to begin with?
I think successful in the sense where when it comes to like a media presence, probably. Like people generally kind of know about me as a Singaporean player, but not so much so as compared to maybe like Nevin Splashske, for example, who actually has more success than me in terms of Counter-Strike.
Right.
Because obviously he has attended more international LANs as compared to me. He has also been playing for a longer period of time, had more experience in tournaments and stuff like that. So I think I would agree that I'm, in a sense, the most successful player from Singapore in terms of Counter-Strike. As I think specifically just for Counter-Strike Global Offensive, because there's actually a long history of Singaporean players that did really well in 1.6 or CS Source and stuff like that. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess we can maybe briefly touch on that as well, because I believe you sort of started playing Counter-Strike a little bit prior to Global Offensive. But before we get into that, I do sort of want to touch on how you even got into sort of esports in general. You sent me a link earlier with some of the achievements that you had prior to Counter-Strike, and one that sort of piqued my interest mostly was League of Legends. Obviously, I've been a keen fan of League of Legends esports since it sort of kicked off. So it looked like you were playing on a competitive team, but was it like a top-level team? Were you like a pro, or were you sort of an amateur pro, or what were you? Where did you sort of sit in the grand scheme of things in League of Legends?
I think in League of Legends, I would be a competitive player, but not anywhere near pro. So like amateur competitive player, because there wasn't actually any teams in League of Legends when I was playing that was being paid to play,
Right.
except for when the Singapore Sentinels was formed. That was the only pro team from well, basically I think like in Singapore, it was like every country had a pro team. Like the Jakarta had like I think the Juggernauts or something like that. I can't remember. And basically, I was just competitive. I was good in the ladder system, so I was kind of like face it ranked 1, right, in the Singapore Malaysian server, something along those lines. And I was playing competitions, local LANs and stuff like that, and getting like podium placements, maybe like top 4 placements. So I was okay in League of Legends, but I was good in League of Legends, but I never had like really went like super serious in the sense where it's like I went pro, went to international tournaments or regional tournaments like that. So I think that was kind of just like a stepping stone for me for going into a competitive setting, and kind of where like I basically tried to learn more about being a competitor. It was good for experience as a player, but not that much so like being good in League of Legends itself.
Right. Do you think you sort of ever would have gone pro in League if you would have stuck with it? Like, obviously you've had quite a bit of success in Counter-Strike, but would you have had the ability as a player to do that same thing in League?
Yeah, I think for sure, 100%, I would be able to play like pro League of Legends. I was pretty good in mobile games, and honestly, like I managed to get like the top 1 ranking in challenges in season 3. So challenges number 1 was the highest like the highest LP. I had the highest LP, which was like 600 or something.
In
I think I
the
had
Singapore server, right? Or was
in the
there a bigger server?
Singapore Malaysian server. I think it was
Right.
a Southeast kind of mixed Southeast Asian server,
Was it
Singapore,
the
Malaysia, and
Garena
Vietnam.
server or something like that?
Yeah, the greener
Yeah,
servers. Yeah,
okay.
yeah. So I was top. I was ranked 1 in the challenger leagues list, like the league.
Yep.
To like completely like I completely threw all those memories away already, I think. But yeah, I was number 1 in like solo ladder system. So I think like individually I was actually pretty skilled. Um, but I kind of decided not to pursue it because I think the scene and the competitive like back then, that was I think 8 years ago.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, it
Season
was
2,
eight.
Season 3 was... The
Yeah,
Season
season 2.
10 was last year, I think, or
Yeah,
this
yeah,
year.
yeah. Yeah, so it was 8 years ago, right? Because I started CS 7 years ago. So 8 years ago, I realized that the League of Legends scene wasn't gonna go anywhere because there's some amazing players like Chowi, for example, that went to the Taipei Assassins and eventually stayed in Taiwan, and that was the only type of success that you see from a pro or competitive Singapore League of Legends player. And I realized that the scene wasn't gonna go anywhere because there wasn't like any talks about salaries. The esports ecosystem in Singapore just didn't really support League of Legends that well.
Right.
So I decided like it wasn't worth my time to play in that, like wasn't worth investing time into trying to go pro in League of Legends. Also because the community wasn't exactly first rate, I guess. like I had ladder games where it's like 10 people would be on Skype back then. 10 people would be on Skype. Like, and those 10 people are going to be in the game. And then the people on my team are basically just fucking about. And the people on the other team is trying so hard to win. And I'm like, what the fuck is going on? So I realized like community is not that great. Scene is not that great. Ecosystem's not that great. So I was like, fuck it. I'm just going to play competitively while, trying a little bit. But that was kind of like, when I kind of gave up was when my elder sister introduced me to Counter-Strike Global Offensive. So that was
Right.
kind of where the ball got rolling, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, let's start talking about Counter-Strike because obviously this is not supposed to be about League of Legends, much as it might seem that it is, based on the discussion so far. We are here to talk about ImpressioN's Counter-Strike and primarily Counter-Strike Global Offensive career. One thing that I do always find a bit interesting is the fact that players do tend to be, like, top players in any given game seem to be really good regardless of what game they play. Like, for example, you were a top player in League of Legends, which is a totally different game to Counter-Strike.
Yeah.
But you move into Counter-Strike and you're a really good Counter-Strike player. I assume, you pick up other games here and there. I don't know what you play in your free time, but I'd imagine you're generally a top tier player in those games without, having to work too hard for it, which I always find that to me, there seems to be a degree of natural talent when it comes to gaming. And some people don't agree with that, but that's my personal philosophy, is that top tier gamers do tend to be able to translate their skills across regardless. Anyway, that's just an aside. So let's talk
I
about...
have to completely agree with that though.
Yeah.
So yeah. It's like you can look at players that play all sorts of different games, and they'll generally be like pretty damn good at that game.
Right.
There is a amount of talent when it comes to actually playing games and understanding and competing and stuff like that. So yeah.
Indeed. Well, let's talk or move into this Counter-Strike discussion then. And what I find interesting immediately was that you sort of said your sister got you into this. So was she someone that played Counter-Strike prior to you, or like how did that sort of all come about, and what was your sort of avenue into Counter-Strike initially?
Okay, if you talk about like Counter-Strike, the very first edition of Counter-Strike that I played was 1.3 when I was 5 years old. And that was also with my elder sister. We went to like a local LAN cafe in Singapore, which is basically like a PC center.
Yep.
There's like 30 PCs there. You rent it for like $1 an hour and some shit like that, right? So me and my elder sister started playing Counter-Strike at LAN cafes when I was at the age of 5. She was like 9. And well, basically we kind of started like a PC gaming adventure together, like as children. And moving on from that point of time, when I was kind of already giving out in League of Legends, my elder sister was like starting out in Counter Strike Global Offensive. So she was playing casually, like matchmaking and stuff with a bunch of friends and my brother-in-law as well. And like out of nowhere, like my elder sister is like, "Hey, join me for some Counter Strike. It's gonna be fun, you know. It's like for old time's sake, and it's just like it's just nostalgic for us." And I started playing Counter Strike Global Offensive, and back then there was the matchmaking system, right? Like going into the matchmaking system, I told her like, "Hey, I want to get a global elite in 3 months." And she was like, yeah, let's go for it. Let's play together all the time. And then we played together all the time. And I eventually got to know friends in Counter Strike Global Offensive. And I got Global Elite in like a month and a half.
That was
So
going to
that
be
was
my
half.
question. Like, how
Yeah, that
quickly
was.
did you make it? Had you
So that was
played?
half the time.
Had you
Yeah.
played like any Counter Strike games prior to that, or similar games, or anything like that, or was it just a natural thing going in and getting global?
Um, Prior to League of Legends, I played competitive FPS games.
Okay,
There
so
was
makes
there was
sense.
a yeah there was Blackshot when I was 13 to when I was 14. That was Blackshot is kind of like Crossfire.
Yep.
So it's basically an FPS game where it's like it's search and destroy, right? You same concept as CS:GO, plant the bomb, defuse the bomb.
Right.
And then I played Battlefield, Bad Company 2, with one of my old clans or teams, and that particular team is like the best Battlefield team in Southeast Asia or Asia in general, I think. So FPS games has always been a natural for me, and it was actually the games that I started out playing. So going into global offensive, even though I took I was basically 3 years off of FPS games, pursuing trying to pursue a career in MOBA, in League of Legends. Going back into global offensive was actually pretty natural for me. I already had like so-called gaming gear, like a good mouse and everything like that, and going to global offensive, just having to get used to aiming and like movement mechanics with the WSD, it was actually pretty easy for me. So in a month and a half, I actually got global elite again, which back then was a big deal because I
Yeah.
think back
Yeah.
then
Of
it was a
course.
lot harder. I think so. Yeah.
All right. Well, look, we're already going over time talking about all of this stuff, and so I do want to speed things up a little bit here. But I do have one more question before we start, like breaking down your career by
All right.
events. And it was like when you were starting to play Counter Strike, were you sort of interested in being a pro player, or was that concept even a thing, or was it more of a natural progression that?
I think the moment I hit global elite, I'm like, hey, okay, I think I have talent for this game. I think I'm pretty good. Uh, I know I can be competitive. Because in matchmaking, I was already meeting like Singaporean competitive players, and I was beating them. Of course, it was just in matchmaking, right? So I thought to myself, okay, let me just find a bunch of people that can like maybe make I can form a team with, and then just play, and then start out from there, and then see how it goes. Because back then I was already giving up on League of Legends, and I was just moving into Counter Strike, and I absolutely loved it. Like everything about Counter Strike was so much more fun for me that as compared to League of Legends, and I was like, okay, fuck it, I'm just gonna do my best in Counter Strike Global Offensive, win some prizes, and see where that takes me. So yeah.
Interesting. All right. Well, then we'll move into a bit of a discussion about some of your first teams. And the first recorded team that you were on Liquidpedia, at least, was Team No Use Talking. So
Yep.
I'd imagine, was there teams prior to that point as well, or was that the very first team that you were actually on?
No Use Talking was actually like a version 3, like the third iteration of a team that was you what made. That was basically like a bunch of people I met in matchmaking, and then we became a team, and then we started playing local lands, and then eventually we got noticed by No Use Talking, because No Use Talking back then was like one of the very first like esports organizations in Singapore,
Okay.
which had like actual peripheral sponsors and stuff like that. Like we get free gear from them, and it was a big deal, right, back then, like six years ago or something. And that was the first like so-called like team that I had a jersey for. So I would kind of consider that No Use Talking was the first team that I actually played for that was like serious and playing on a Southeast Asian level. Because then we would participate in online tournaments more, that involved like teams like back then was NXL, like a really strong team, or Skyraid with Zack
Yep.
and Crazy Guy and stuff like that. And we're actually going pretty okay against them. And yeah, No Use Talking is like the first like competitive team that I played in CS:GO, I believe.
So that was sort of around like 2014, 2015 kind of time. And just to touch on what that roster was, for those that maybe are interested in that deep dive back, there's probably a few names here that you don't recognize, at least for myself. There's a lot that I don't recognize. So there was Koyuki, Nico, Vicious, Shinji Teru, and then ImpressioN and Spiels, I think, were some of the players that were on that roster. So obviously we recognize ImpressioN, and Spiels is probably the other one that people can recognize. Obviously he's playing, I think, on Huatsai at the moment. So he's sort of still kicking around within the scene. But it seems like the other guys haven't really stuck around. Are there any of those guys still sort of playing, or have they all sort of moved on?
Koyuki's moved on. Nico's playing Valorant right now because he just came out of the army, like not that long ago, and Nico's in a pretty good team. Shinji Teru's like uni com sci major, so like completely gaming for like casually and then working already. Actually, in No Use Talking, at one point of time, we also had who was it? Let me think. At one point of time in No Use Talking, we also had shit. What's his name? Fuck, I forgot. We also had like a couple of other players.
Like players that are still sticking around, or
players that fuck, he's actually still playing, but I forgot his name. Shit. I just completely lost it. It's okay. Let's just move on from this.
All right. Well, whoever that is, shout outs to you. ImpressioN doesn't remember you, so sorry for that. Look, yeah, let's move on anyway, because I think that's still a pretty early part of your career, and it's not a hugely impactful part of why people know you. So we'll move into the time where things start to get a little bit more interesting, which is kind of late 2015. Now, this is the time where you actually, I think, start to get some rep maybe as a player. I want to talk about the World Championship 2015 if you. So this is it's a tournament that, like, I don't even really remember, although I wasn't really involved in Asian CS back in 2015 at all. But this was like one of those tournaments where you send a geographical team. You basically send, okay, your team Singapore, your team Russia, your team Germany, whatever the fuck it may be. So Singapore had a team, and you were actually on the team alongside Nico and Spiel. So you had a couple of players from your team, No Use Talking. Moxie was there, and then this guy called Volmust as well, who I'm not sure who that is. You know, I've never heard of that player before. But was this were you like one of the best players in the region at the time? Because I wonder, like, obviously this is still pretty early on in your CS career, and, you know, there's a lot of players that maybe have been around a lot longer than you that you might expect to be in Team Singapore in 2015, and yet you and Team No Use Talking are comprising up most of this roster. So where were you at as an individual as far as the scene was concerned? Like, are you the best player or one of the best players in Singapore even in September 2015 already?
I think in September 2015, I was already one of the top players in Singapore. I think back then there were a lot more players in contention for that, like for that particular title, like the number one player in Singapore and stuff like that. Because of course there was like Bovines, which had Alecks and Moxie, and then there was also there was us, No Use Talking, which had basically me, Spills. Nico was insane, is insane. Like, he's super mechanically sound. He just like couldn't find the time to commit to the game, so that's like a huge waste. But basically there was also Dreamscape, which had Benkai and Splashske inside of it. And so yeah, there was like these 6 players that was like super, like 6, like 7 players that was like super well known. And I was already like constantly fighting for like top 5 player in Singapore. So I was definitely a top player in Singapore. But I wasn't like the solid first best player in Singapore for sure. I remember like for TWC, what happened was actually I think the guys from Dreamscape couldn't join the tournament because of studies. I believe it was something along those lines. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I just thought it was interesting to see you as an individual sort of making it into that roster after sort of still being quite new to the scene, or at least the perception to me was that you were still quite new to the scene. Anyway, it's a bit of an aside. It's not a major tournament, but obviously you go over, you play in this, and I don't think Team Singapore did all that well. I'm just having a quick look back, and yeah, I mean, you guys came 13th to 15th, which was essentially last place, but realistically speaking, going against teams from France, Poland, Sweden, you know, these kinds of regions at that time is not an easy kind of a prospect for an Asian team, regardless, but especially
remember,
then.
Man. I remember like this pistol round against Norway where Poly just basically fucked us so hard. Like, dude just destroyed us. It was insane.
Well, you live and you learn, I suppose. And I think now this is a good time to jump into where people probably start to really recognize you, at least like international viewers and people like myself who sort of started following CS like early on, but weren't like really ingrained in the scene. So I'm talking, of course, about Team Dreamscape. Now, this is the first iteration of that BOOT roster, like before you guys were BOOT. And I think this is the roster that would go on to be the most prolific Singaporean Counter-Strike roster and probably one of the best, if not the best, Southeast Asian roster that we've seen in Counter-Strike. So, I mean, it's almost a legendary roster within the Asian scene, I do want to say, but can we start from the very outset? Like, how did this team come about? Because obviously, you guys were all on separate teams, so you must have had to have come together and decided, you know what, we want to sort of try and form this quote-unquote super team. Was that like the intention at the time, or what was the mindset behind forming Team Dreamscape?
So Dreamscape already had a full roster back then.
Right.
In I think in I joined them in late 2015, I believe.
Hmm.
And back then they already had a roster of 5 players, which was Benkai, Splashske, Lumberjack, Dejavu, and ZHSL or Fat Cake. So these were the 5 players that they had. After TWC, like short time after TWC, not basically had to disband because of army. We had Shinji Teru and Spills going into army, I believe, and then Nico actually went to join like a joint project with Alex and Moxie.
Right.
They were actually trying to form like the first professional like team in Singapore. That project failed, I believe. It was supposed to be sponsored by My Republic, which is the ISP. I believe My Republic operates in Australia as well, right?
It's not a name that I recognize, but they might.
Yeah, so it's basically a ISP, right? So kind of like XKT or stuff like that. And I went to make like a mixed team with Spills and Kuna S and Ken. All these players are players which also played in TWC, like the qualifiers and stuff like that. Like actually Ken is actually my mentor. Like I wanted to shout out to him just now when you're talking about the noise talking, which was Ken, because he's basically like the guy that taught me how to play proper Counter Strike, in the sense where it's like how to flash with your teammates, how to play a support role, how to differentiate different times to do different things and stuff like that. That guy's like super smart, and unfortunately now he's like old. He's like 31, 32, has a kid and everything. But I still play with him. He's a great guy. So shout out to Ken for being like the chillest dude and like teaching me so much about CS. But okay, so moving on. After that team failed as well, because basically Spills still had to go to an army. Spills, which is Splashske's brother, told me like, Anthony, go talk to Dreamscape. Try to get a slot in that team because that's the best team in Singapore, hands down. No doubt about it. You have the talent. Go join them. Go try out for them. So I spoke to Splashske, and then I basically went into BOOT. BOOT Dreamscape. I went into Dreamscape and I took over who I believe was Dejavu. And do I actually like okay? I took over Dejavu, and then ZHSL left. So basically, what happened was that Dreamscape had a roster of me, Splashske, Benkai, Rede, and Lumberjack. Rede is also one of those Singaporean players that has moved on with life already.
Yep.
And that was the early, like the first, I believe, like one of the early, like the Dreamscape rosters that constantly went up on HLTV. So I think from then on it was kind of like where we that was kind of like the roster for I think the first half of the year.
Yeah, there was a
Yeah.
couple of roster changes, but we'll get to them shortly.
Mhm.
I want to talk about some of the initial results that you had with this team when you first joined. So I think the first tournament, or the first sort of, at least interesting to me, tournament that you played with this roster was Dreamhack Masters Malmo, the 2016 qualifier, which would have been, an Asia qualifier. And this is one where, unfortunately, you come more or less dead last. But I look at the bracket here, and you go up against Tyloo. It's a single elim bracket. You go against Tyloo, the team that actually goes on to win the tournament, and you get wrecked basically 2-0. It was 16-9, 16-8. So I don't know how much time you had in the roster prior to this, but that's not a fun start to a new team, is it?
I think it was kind of okay because we did play this best of 3 with sub, I believe. We played general, and Benny is basically like the coach management kind of guy. He can play, but he's not the guy that practices with us full time. I mean, not full time, but like all the time. Because Lumberjack is actually a doctor. So even back then, sometimes he had like scheduling issues and stuff like that. So playing against Tai Lu with a sub it's not gonna be fun, right? Even if it's 2016's Tai Lu. And I think honestly, like as a part-time team play against like back then who was already the top team in Asia, it's actually not that bad of a result. Considering we got like 9, 8 rounds and stuff like that, I don't think it was too depressing for us. It was just like unfortunate we felt that we had to play Tai Lu in like the first fucking game in like a single lane best of 3 like kind of bracket. So yeah.
Yeah, so you talked about, is it Rede or Reed?
I think Rede.
Rede. Yeah,
Yeah.
I look at that and that to me sounds like Reed. But anyway, so he left the team right after this, or very shortly after this, and it seems like Dejavu sort of came back into the roster. I do just want to sort of touch on who these two guys are, like as to where they might have gone or where are they now, sort of what's going on with those guys.
So Rede actually, after he left Dreamscape, still continued to play Counter-Strike with Shukufuku Sunshine. They went to ISF, I believe. These games are actually on HLTV, so those are actually like they actually have like decent LAN experience and stuff like that. But after that, I didn't keep track or keep up with him anymore. So I believe he's just playing casually nowadays.
Yeah.
And I haven't played with him in like a year and a half or something. And as for Dejavu is actually like a redecorated CS Source player. He's a ex-teammate of Kaze. Kaze and Dejavu were like the two monsters in Counter-Strike Source because they were mechanically like insane. Like they were crazy good. And the transition into CSGO for Dejavu was not that great. Because CS Source and CSGO definitely had like quite different mechanics. But Dejavu right now, he's actually working and I think he's studying at the same time. He's not playing competitively anymore, like just like a casual player because I mean he has like a huge passion and love for Counter-Strike. So yeah, he's still around, just not so competitive anymore, I think.
Yeah, one of the funniest things for me is like I didn't even really know who Dejavu was, and then I was I don't want to get into the whole weeds of this whole VAC situation that's going on right now in Asia, but I posted that Reddit thread. I'm sure you saw it, and he actually commented on it saying like he knew Spiels or something. I was like, oh, who's this guy? Like if he knows Spiels, he must be someone from the Singaporean scene. I looked in, his name was like DJVX or something like that. I was like, that must be Dejavu X, and I looked in and I sort of messaged him and I was like, oh, you Dejavu X? And he was like, yeah. So then I saw him come up when I was doing research for your in retrospect, and it all sort of ties together. It's just one of those things, like a bit of a small world.
It's Singapore. Everything's small in Singapore. Like even the competitive scene, at the peak of the Singaporean competitive scene, there was maybe like 20 teams, and out of those 20 teams, like the 15 teams basically all knew each other. So you basically get like 5 teams which are casual, and then 15 teams who are constantly playing against each other and know about each other like all the time. So yeah.
All right, let's get into one of the first like really successful results that you had as Team Dreamscape. Now, I'm talking about Extremesland 2016, and this is one of those tournaments that I actually hold quite a weight in when it comes to the Asian region. I think it's one of those tournaments that if you're an international fan, you probably don't really look at that as much of a big deal. But for me, to be seeing a tournament that really invites or has qualification systems for pretty much every single region within Asia, ANZ included, you've got like all of the Arabic countries as well, India, etc. I actually put a lot of weight on the results that come from Extremesland because that to me shows which the best team in Asia really, really is. Whereas if you're looking at something like even ESL Pro League at the moment is like, well, you got 3 Chinese teams and then a Thai team. It's like, well, who else gets a chance? So, I mean, I know that's like a stark difference. We're in 2020 now versus 2016 back then, but I actually think this is a really big result. And it's a result where Dreamscape came 3rd, 4th, equal to the Mongols at the time, only behind Vici, Cyberzen, and Renegades, which is a pretty damn good shout, given that you only just joined this team, like early in 2016 or maybe late in 2015. So this is about 9 months maybe into your tenure with this roster. And you've already got yourselves a fairly high placing in an Extremesland tournament. But what was the expectation for you and the team sort of going into this initially? Were you sort of expecting to be one of the top teams there, or what was the deal?
Okay, so we basically played the Singapore qualifier, got into Extremesland, and then when the lineup, like the full lineup for like the teams attending was announced, we were actually expecting like maybe at least a quarterfinal like what's that result?
Top 8, right?
Yeah, top like kind of like top 8 result, yeah.
Basically, you would have made
Because
it into playoffs.
yeah, we were made it into playoffs because the teams that were attending, um we didn't know that much about the Chinese teams, except for Vici. We know MVP back then wasn't great.
No,
Like
yep.
honestly, they weren't good at all. Uh, and the only teams that we were kind of just looking out for was actually basically NXL, which had Bentet.
Mhm.
Mongols obviously back then they were already like they had Zuckerberg and stuff, and they were already like really good. There was also MITH, which is Thailand team, cause like we're basically neighbors. We play against each other a lot in Southeast Asia. So we are more worried about the Southeast Asian teams. And of course, there was the Renegades, because back then the Renegades was already a big deal,
Yep.
right? So we were expecting us, if we were to get a good group, if we weren't put in a group with like, for example, Renegades and CyberZen or Vici, and we would actually like get into quarterfinals pretty okay, and then like we would just work on it like game by game. So that actually panned out pretty well for us. Like in groups, we were in Group A with I think
Mongols, Risky,
Mongols.
and MVP. Yeah.
Yeah. So we had no idea how good Risky was because that was like basically our first encounter with them. We know
Mm.
MVP Kano is pretty good, because it feels like a domestic lineup matchup because Malaysia and Singapore are so close to each other.
Yeah.
You it's very common for Singapore teams to travel to Malaysia to play in lands, and vice versa
Mhm.
if there's ever lands in both countries. So we knew MVP Kano was good. Uh, we knew the Mongols was good, and we had no idea about how to play against Risky. So we just did our best in groups. I believe we lost the opener to Risky, and we won them after in the best of 3 for to get into playoffs. So it was actually we actually, I believe, like even though it was just like 4 maps or 5 maps in group stages, I believe our team kind of gained confidence throughout the tournament. We kind of started off really slow and then we slowly peaked throughout the tournament. I believe that was how it felt for us. Yeah.
Yeah. You went through all gamers as well in the playoffs bracket.
Yep.
So what was this kind of a team? This was Chris Mack. So he's obviously, again, speaking of this small world kind of a situation, he's that Chinese streamer that's been
Yeah, dude.
implicated in this whole VAC ban situation. So
Yeah.
look, that's something to kind of just keep thinking about. Yaya, I've seen him around a little bit, but the other guys, K2 Meister, HZ, and Ed101, haven't really seen too much from them in recent times. So I guess, what were they, like you said, you didn't really know much about them at the time. Were they like theoretically a good team, or did you sort of expect to beat them in that game?
Well, so here's the thing, right? It's kind of like in Asia,
Hmm.
or actually back then, like 4 years ago, in Asia we always look at in Singapore at least we always look at the Korean and the Chinese teams for being like real professional teams because they're the countries that kind of like started a good esports scene really early. So we had respect for them in the sense where it's like, oh, these guys are probably full-time pros, so we should really watch out for how they play and stuff like that. And because we basically didn't know how they played, we weren't that worried. Like we always had this confidence in ourselves in Dreamscape that we were good players and that we can do well, and we just always played our own game and then kind of like just ride like the momentum and everything of it. And back then, momentum Counter Strike, like even right now, it's like basically the same thing. It's insane.
Hmm.
So yeah, we basically just kind of rode the momentum to like coming out from a very tough group, especially the game against MVP Kano, which went like double overtime or something like that, and qualifying and like beating the team that beat us, and then kind of like I remember like Havoc, Harvey, right? Like he was kind of like BMing us, like he's like they play exactly same in the demo. It's so easy, bro, so easy. And then we beat them in the best of 3 after
Hmm.
to qualify. So it was like this super like in the Singaporean way, called it super shock feeling. You know what I mean? Like it was just like we kind of like from out coming out of groups, we felt really confident So playing against all gamers wasn't exactly a huge problem for us because basically the Chinese players weren't that known as well. So we weren't like worried like, oh my god, there's like a summer here, or oh shit, there's like, attacker there, or some shit like that. So it was actually okay for us, I think.
All right. Well, speaking of Chinese players, then you go on into the semi-final and you play against Vici Cyberzen. Now, I didn't even realize this before I was actually doing this interview right now, but I've just been looking at the result, and Vici Cyberzen actually forfeited the first map because they were late into the server. So do you want to tell me what was going on here? Because I don't remember that at all.
Bruh, this was a fucking shit show, man. Like, this was the juiciest story of the year, I believe. Like, VG guys, basically the old players like the Savage and TV and Love YY Lovey, right?
Yep.
So these three guys are like, I'm not sure about Lovey, but as far as I know, Savage and TB are like crazy drinkers. So from what I heard, they were partying the night before, and they basically were just like MIA or dead in the room when it was basically game time already, right? And they were late, and the admins were like, hey, so these guys are late. Do you want to forfeit them, or do you want to forfeit them for map, or do you want to just play? And at that point, us as players, like in Dreamscape, we were like, bro, what the fuck? Why are you asking us to make this decision? We're the players, you're the admins. Follow your rulebook. If you want to disqualify them, disqualify them. If you want to forfeit the map, forfeit the map. Don't ask us what we want to do, because no matter what we choose, we're gonna be the bad guys. We're in China in a Chinese tournament, and playing against a Chinese team, and we're Singaporeans. We're not particularly liked. Like the Chinese players weren't particularly fond of Singaporean players and stuff like that. So like, don't make us like make that decision. We were basically just sat down ready for like an hour and a half waiting for Vici to show up, and they just never showed up all the way up until like an hour and a half later, and then they're like, hey guys, okay, what do you want to do? Like the admins come to us and ask us, what do you want to do? And we're just like super fucked up already. We just had no idea what to say. We're just like, you guys make the decision. Don't look at us. We don't know anything. We're just players. We're here to play your tournament. You make the decision. And eventually they made the decision to like forfeit the first map. And for some reason, like we're kind of super tilted at the point, and Vici came at us with a passion to fuck us in the ass. Like they were killing us, and then just like Zoking was doing the Zoking thing. He was just standing on our bodies and spraying. After getting the first entry into B side on cash, just standing there and then spraying the guy's dead body. And I was like, what the fuck is going on? Like we didn't do shit, man. You guys are late. Admins decide to forfeit your map. It wasn't our choice or anything like that, right? Like, why are you going at us like this? All of this for like a so-called first big international LAN like in Asia. Obviously, not counting TWC, right? this was super surprising for me, and like for me personally. So I had no idea what happened. I knew for a fact that VG was late. And it was super unprofessional of them. But I was just like a player back then. It wasn't so much like I could go on Twitter and then like talk shit and shit like that, because back then that wasn't really a thing, right? But that was super interesting, I guess. But we definitely didn't play this series to our best of abilities, because Vici was just like full on no respect, and we just couldn't hold our angles. And they kind of just rolled us over after that. So it was tough, yeah.
Maybe not much of a surprise that we don't see those players at the top level of Chinese Counter-Strike anymore, or at least the majority of them. Obviously, Advent and Zoking are still on Vici, but yeah, the others seem to have fallen by the wayside. Anyway, that's an interesting little time, I guess, for you guys, just getting used to what's going on in Asia. Let's move into when Dejavu departs from the roster, and this was around October in 2016. So just after the Extremesland tournament, and this is when Moxie comes in. So it's where the Dreamscape roster really starts to resemble like that golden era roster, and starts to look like the roster that I'm always like, oh, bring back Dreamscape, bring back BOOT, or bring back Singapore Counter-Strike or something like that. That's the roster that I'm sort of starting to talk about. So what was the deal with Moxie? Because I know I sort of saw you talking about him in some interviews from around that time period as being a player that really caused you some problems playing sort of domestically within Singapore. Was he like a player that you guys headhunted for Dreamscape?
Kinda, yeah. So back I mentioned something along the lines of like Alecks, Moxie, and Nico attempting a project to become like the first salary team in Singapore, right?
Yep.
And that failed. And Moxie, we went to. I'm sorry. Just let me think about this a bit. So after that failed, we decided to get Moxie because we really wanted to like make the roster like really strong. And also after Extremesland, Dejavu unfortunately had some like real life issues that was really like bringing his focus away from CS. He just was like underperforming a lot. And it was understandable because he had like a really tough situation in life at that point of time. And so, but we also wanted, because obviously after the good result at Extremesland, we wanted to go even further because we're like, hey, we actually can do this. Asia is not that hard. Uh, so we wanted to like bolster the strength in our roster by picking up someone that was really good, and that was Moxie. Because Moxie, just a little like context is that Moxie is kind of like a perfect player. He's complete, right? He can pistol, he can rifle, he can second call, he can even first call. He can op, he can do everything, and he's super smart. And he's just like a good player, right? So we wanted to get him in, like the best player outside of our team, to kind of like take over the guy in our team that wasn't performing as well. And he was okay with it. He was on board, and so yeah, we kind of headhunted him a bit, because he was like coming out of a field project, I believe. And eventually he joined, and I believe like that was kind of when like the four-man core of like the going into boot came about. So yeah.
And we will talk about going into boot fairly shortly because we're getting to the end of 2016, which is almost sort of the end of the tenure of this Dreamscape roster and the start of when you moved into boot. And before we do talk about that, I actually want to bring up something that we haven't mentioned just yet, which is military service. And that's always something that you have to kind of consider when you're talking to a Singaporean esports player, is how their career has been affected by military service. So you told me in sort of November 2016 is when your military service ended. So everything that we've talked to prior to this point, you've been going through this military service. Do you think that really affected you as an individual or as a player, or was it like not a big deal? Because I'll give you some context from my perspective here.
Yeah.
When I look at you as a player compared to maybe someone like Benkai or someone like Splashske, it seems to me like the military service in your career came before you really kicked things off as a pro. Whereas for these guys, it's like smack bang in the middle of the time when they were more or less almost at their peak or could have gone a little bit further with their career. They actually started their military service. So I look at you as someone who was being largely unaffected actually by the military service compared to some of the other guys.
Yep. Well, okay. Just to put some like history into this and why that happened this way, so it's actually because I gave up on studies. I dropped out in middle school. I believe it's middle school, maybe for the Australian viewers.
We have a
Um,
primary school and a high school, so there's like
yeah, okay. So I
grade 1
dropped
to
out in
7,
high school.
yeah,
Yeah.
and
So one
8
to
to
seven
12.
is primary school, right?
Correct, yeah.
And then eight to maybe 12
8 to
is
12 is high school, but you
yeah.
can
So I
stop
dropped
after
out.
10.
I dropped out in grade 9.
Okay.
Yeah, or grade 10 actually. Because I just wasn't a guy that liked to study. I like to do. I'm more of a practical type of guy as compared to like a like a non-practical type guy. My brain is
Studying, yeah, like
just
a
doping. Yeah, I'm not a
theory, yeah.
studying type. Yeah, I'm not a theory guy. So I dropped out of school really early and started working, and then started playing Counter Strike. Um, I enlisted in 2014. I started CS:GO in 2013, and I enlisted in 2014 and got out November 2016. Right, so that's 2 years. And throughout this period of time that I've been playing, that we've been covering all the way up to now, was me in the army. So I wasn't playing, definitely wasn't playing full time. I was playing maybe like 4 hours a day at most, 4 to 6 hours a day at most. So I wasn't really good back then either. I was like good in Singapore, but when it came to playing against like good teams from other countries, I generally lacked a little something and wasn't performing very well, like stat wise. So it kind of it kind of it kind of definitely did affect my personal play. Like I couldn't attend TWC 2016 qualifiers, because I was in the army. I couldn't attend to TWC 2016 either when when Team China didn't get their visas, and then Singapore was chose to replace them because Singapore was second in the qualifier. And I think if I managed to actually attend that and play against, I believe, Glaive and Cadian, like Denmark back then, 2016 TWC, Denmark was really good. If I actually had that experience, it would have really like boosted me as an individual player, I believe. Splashske and Benkai got back from there and then got really good.
Yeah.
And that was kind of where like this is kind of the big difference between why they are putting up numbers earlier than me, I believe. Like my own personal belief was that when I was in the team with them, I kind of felt at some point of times I kind of felt like I was inferior to them. So those two players took a lot of space, but that's kind of in the BOOT thing. So Army definitely did affect my individual level and performance. But I feel that doing it, like having it done early, was actually pretty alright for me.
Yeah, I mean, it clearly worked out pretty okay for you in the long term.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we'll talk then about ROG Masters 2016. Now, I don't know if this was before or after the military service ends, but it's much of a muchness, really. It's like right about that time. And
Yep.
this is the first tournament that I actually, obviously attended that you were at, if you
Yeah,
remember.
yeah,
That was a long time ago. I didn't even really know who Team Dreamscape was at the time. I knew Mongols was pretty good. I think from my perspective, Mongols kind of went in as the favorite, but I was particularly interested to see how the likes of Avant and Chiefs would go, two of the Aussie teams going overseas. So this is almost like another one, for people that maybe don't know what ROG Masters is, it's almost like another one of these Extremesland tournaments where it had qualifiers from all over the region within Asia, and then you had the teams go to this sort of global, quote unquote, global finals, but it was more of an Asia final. So I still think they're a pretty big deal as far as the Asian tournaments go. Was this like your first time playing against ANZ teams, just as an aside?
Yeah, definitely the first time. I remember playing against Avant. We were super prepared against them because we had no idea what they were gonna do.
Hmm.
And it was interesting because it was the first event that had AUNZ team, and that in itself was something that was super huge, like personally for me. And also to answer the question about the army thing, I was like ROG Masters was like a week, yeah, like 4 days after I was done with the army.
Right.
So I literally just like got was done with national service, and I was coming out of I was just like becoming a free man, and then I attended ROG Masters. So playing against the AUNZ team and all these like big teams from Asia again, it was just really cool for us.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So in the context of this tournament, where does Dreamscape theoretically sit, right? Like before we go in, let's not regard your result. Obviously, you ended up coming second, as we know. But what was the theory behind where Dreamscape should finish there? Because you did just have a pretty good finish at Extremesland 2016. So I'd imagine expectations realistically were pretty high. Now, I should probably know because I was there casting the event. But to be honest, my level of knowledge about the Asian scene at the time was incredibly lacking. So I wouldn't say I was an expert at the time, but from now that I look back at it, it seems like you would have gone into that as one of the favorites.
Yeah, we actually was super confident going into ROG Masters. Because the teams that we know about, we've played against, and the teams that we basically don't know about aren't that famous as well. Kind of, it was actually pretty alright for us. Like going to ROG Masters, we believed that we would at least had a good playoff run. But actually going into grand finals was it was kind of like when we saw the brackets, we were like, hey, this brackets are pretty okay. Like we can get into grand final as well. Pretty smoothly, not like easily, but we could definitely do it. And I mean, we got there. Kind of got but flopped out in GS though. So yeah.
Yeah, a little bit. But even to make it through to the grand finals, I don't think it was a terrible result for you. I'm also interested to sort of touch on the fact that there was another Singaporean team here, which was what was
Leapfrog,
their
I
name?
think.
Leapfrog, yeah.
Yeah.
So this was Insanity, Alecks, YSK, Striker X, and Tommy. So you had two teams coming through from Southeast Asia, or at least from Singapore, I should say. But what's interesting is in the SCA qualifier, they actually were the team to come from the SCA qualifier, Leapfrog. It doesn't look like you guys actually played in the SCA qualifier. You qualified through what was like a last chance qualifier kind of a thing. So how did they manage to make it through the SCA qualifier? Obviously, you didn't play. And what were the circumstances behind you having to play in this last chance qualifier as opposed to the normal SCA qual?
I believe the SCA qualifier was held when I was still in the army. And because it was the last couple of like weeks of my army, I basically didn't have any leaves or offs left.
Hmm.
And it's probably something along the lines of some scheduling issue that we didn't like we end up not attending it, because it's always the thing, right? Dreamscape was never a full-time team. It was always a part-time team. Studying, working, national service, yada yada. Um, it was common for us to miss events or qualifiers and stuff like that, just purely because of scheduling reasons. So yeah, I assume that was the reason why as
Okay.
well right now.
All right, let's discuss this grand final then a little bit. You've obviously alluded to it just before. You played against Mongols, who at the time were not. They didn't have machine gun. This was the period where he was over in Splice, so it wasn't like that like OP Mongols era, but they were still pretty good. Kabal,
Yep.
Zilkenberg, Dobu, NCL, and Sogu, and they would have been one of the other favorites in this tournament. But you went into that grand final. It's a best of 5, and you had 2 out of the 3 maps that went to double digits. You lost 3-0 though. So tell me your memories of this grand final. Like, how did it play out? You lost the first map on Cage 16-4, if you remember.
Yeah, so on Cache, basically we formulated a game plan. We knew what they were gonna do, but we just weren't hitting the shots, man. I believe we were kind of nervous on first map in GFs, and if you look at the stats, right, the the worst performing player in grand finals on the first map was actually Nevin Splashske, right, and he I believe that he was kind of antsy because we were playing first time on a big stage. Like, you were there, right? You knew it was a big
Yeah, it
stage and
was a big
everything. There
stage. It
was
was
actually
cool.
yeah, it was super cool for an Asian event to be at that level back then. I mean, freaking Rede was there hosting.
Dude, if
And
I could copy paste that event into 2021, I would do it, because based on what I've seen so far from Asia, it would be a step up again,
yeah, yeah,
unfortunately.
yeah, exactly. So that event was super well done, and playing grand finals as a team that's part time against the best team and the heavy favorites of the tournament, uh, with a live audience and everything, like mics are booming,
Hmm.
casters are shouting, we can hear everything. Like, not everything, but the atmosphere is not easy to deal with, especially at that point of time. I believe Nevin was only 15 or 16. I can't remember. Like, he was super young, and I very specifically remember that after that first map, like me and Nevin went for like a smoke break outside, right? Because back then I was still smoking, and I was telling him like, bro, come on, I believe in you. Everybody in this team believes in you. Let's step it up, man. I know you can play better than this. Like, I basically like I had like a pep talk with him.
Yeah.
And like second map he went ham. Like, started off the game like with an ace and everything on pistol. It was insane. Like, the first map we just weren't hitting shots. We had the plan, we had the idea of how to play. We knew they were gonna pick it because at that point in time, Cache was the Mongols' best map. Cache was the Mongols' best map, and they picked it. We just couldn't hit the shots. It was unfortunate because I think if we had won the first map, we probably would have won this series. This is what I always think, right? Like, it always kind of depends on the
Hindsight,
first map.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like, going into the second map, we actually lost like 12-16, and it wasn't all that bad, right? Like, it was actually a pretty okay score, but that's kind of what you expect of like a part-time team. Not all the players will kind of like have like take turns like dipping in performance like drastically, and then all it takes is like like one mistake in Counter Strike. That's how unforgiving this game is. It's just one mistake, and then if essentially that one mistake will lead up to you losing a round, which will fuck your economy up, which will lose you the game. So this is kind of like going to grand finals, losing the first map with such a like heavy we basically lost the first map with quite a like heavy, like it could put quite a heavy burden on our shoulders because we formulated a game plan and just out aimed us, and it felt like pretty shit to lose that way. So second map wasn't great for us, and then it just kind of
The
rolled on
series
from
just
there as
snowballs
well.
from there. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
why
yeah,
I
yeah.
always look at like a best of 5, and if it's down 0-2, I'm like,
Yeah,
very
tough.
rare the team is ever going to come back from that. I've only ever seen it,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think, maybe once or twice in the whole time that I've been casting Counter Strike. So it doesn't happen very often. Anyways, what else happened at this event was, and I don't know that actually this happened at this event, but it's my conjecture or my suspicion that this is where the BOOT hype train maybe started to get rolling, because BOOT had a team at this event. It was a Chinese team that doesn't really, like, even if you look at the players on that roster, it's a team of players that I don't even recognize. So they haven't gone anywhere, basically. DSN was
I think
involved.
Destroyer was inside that team.
Was he? He was playing under a
Yeah.
different name by the looks of things, if he was.
Original Hut.
Okay,
I believe that was him, yeah.
So what, maybe one player we still sort of recognize? We've got MH Biceps, SAR7 Ever, QKA, Original Heart, and Banger. I don't really recognize too many of those, apart from, as you mentioned, Destroyer. But what's...
Yeah, they're still around, but,
Yeah, but are they, like... You know what I mean? Like, they might be around playing in China, but are they? It's like saying, the Avant-Garde roster is still around. Like, yeah, Iron is still around. He's playing Valorant, that kind of thing. But they're not really around, you know what I mean? Someone that is still around is DSN, who's obviously now involved in Paper X, was a big part of the BOOT Dreamscape roster as well. So he's the one that I kind of want to focus on here. Did you or anyone from the team sort of meet DSN there or talk to BOOT or anyone that represented that roster at ROG Masters 2016?
So we didn't see DSN. DSN was having a planned holiday because I think his brother or something was getting married. I can't remember. But he had a planned holiday, so unfortunately he couldn't attend ROG Masters 2016. We didn't see him there. We did, however, talk to the GM, like the general manager, and also the boss of BOOT back then, which is Vash and Blade. So these two guys. Basically after the grand finals, everyone's just chilling. We met the BOOT GM in the lobby, and he was like, he was talking to General, the guy that stood in for us that I just talked about, Benny.
Yeah.
He was kind of the guy taking care of us and stuff like that. They spoke to him, and then they said like, hey, meet me in my hotel room. We can talk. We would like to have like a discussion with you. Like, it's business. And we're like, okay. So me and General went there because I was the best Chinese speaking player at that point of time already, along with General, and we went in and then we talked a bit. We established contact, like traded the WeChat like contact and stuff like that. And then it was just like, at that point of time, it was very clear to us that they wanted to possibly support us, because obviously their own lineup didn't do that well. They finished like dead last, I believe.
Yep.
But on the other hand, you have like a part-time team from Singapore that no one knows about, that got second, losing only to like the favorites of the tournament. So they were like, okay, like for them, I believe what they felt was that it was a good opportunity to kind of like invest overseas, because obviously in China it was already like super saturated, I guess, in the sense where it's like there's so many players, but to put together a good team would take time, and players tend to generally like give up on each other a lot easier in China, because I don't think like working out problems and stuff like that was such a common thing like 4 years ago. People generally use like lineup changes as like a solution to basically every problem in the team. I believe this was kind of like what happened like back then, because Counter-Strike back then was really not stable. Like when you look at it right now, like in 2016, like all the teams that basically had problems wouldn't like stick together. They would just like change players. So that was common in China as well. So they actually decided to like talk to us and stuff like that. We established contact, and because ROG Masters was in November, right? Basically throughout the month of November to December, we're just discussing all these contract things with them, like how the salaries, the expectations, how they're gonna support us, stuff like that. And well, kind of just like boomed, and then like in early 2017, BOOT Dreamscape was formed. So yeah.
Yeah, so it did sort of kick off at this event, which, like, I had no idea that was actually a thing, but I just looked at it and I was like, there was a BOOT team here that didn't play very well, and then you guys get picked up by BOOT not like 2 months later after the event.
Yeah,
Put
it was super huge. Yeah. Like,
Anyways,
like for me, it was super huge because I just came out of army, and then like immediately like my pro career was like on my doorstep.
Yep.
Like I was like, it was whew. It was
that's
amazing
good, right?
then, so yeah.
So exactly. Obviously that's a big time for your career. Now, one thing that did happen, I think just before you guys actually went into BOOT, was Alecks replaced Lumberjack, or it might have happened just after, either way. Sometime around this period, Alecks comes back into the roster, replaces Lumberjack, or comes into the roster for the first time. So now it's like that core of the BOOT roster that we sort of knew actually is there, those 5 guys that we all know and love. So how did that sort of come about? Was it because, Lumberjack was moving on, or was he removed, or what?
Well, okay, simply put, the the entire thing was like this. Lumberjack is a doctor. To be a doctor in Singapore means it's a huge fucking deal.
Yeah.
Any stereotypical Asian drama or joke is like, hey, you grow up, you be doctor.
Mm.
You be doctor or engineer, or you don't come home. That's how it is like in Asia, right? And Lumberjack made it, and there's no way he's gonna sacrifice like his like career in medicine to play semi-pro. And so that was like kind of when like we told Lumberjack like, hey, we're getting a contract, we wanna go further. Lumberjack was super cool about it. He's like, you guys go ahead, man. Uh, you guys have it going for you now. Like I'm so glad to be part of this journey and so
Mm.
glad to help you guys achieve this. And now that this is like what's gonna happen, he just basically said like I'm out, I'm moving on. And so he kind of like retired, like like somewhat as a winner, like in the scene in the eyes of Asian players. So it was super cool for him, of him and for him, I guess. And that was when we talked to Alecks, because obviously Alecks was the other guy in Singapore that was giving us a huge fucking headache when we play against him, because Alecks is like he's always like, okay, Alecks, like, just to put it in context, right? Alecks is always when between the years of 2013 to 2016 or 2015, for 2 years, like Alecks was the guy that I looked up to in Singapore as a player. Like I would I would like I would like deliberately find out where he plays just so I can get 1v1 with him all the time. He obviously doesn't know this, like up until like in 2016 or 2017 that I told him, right? But this was the guy that I was super like stoked on like playing with, like, because like I felt like he was a really good player, he was really smart, had plenty of experience, and also like just individually really skilled. Then of course he was Moxie's ex-teammate. He also played in Leapfrog. Leapfrog actually did pretty good. They got top 8 in tournament, I believe. And Alecks had a good showing there as well. And Alecks played that tournament with like a lineup that wasn't that great, I believe. Um, like it was basically just mixed team, and they still did pretty well. So I knew like Alecks is capable of like winning, and had the right idea of like winning, and he would like really fit well into the team. So everybody agreed. Like it wasn't my decision, obviously, it was like a team decision, but I was super on board with him like joining us,
You were
and
the
it
driving
happened.
force.
I wasn't like exactly the driving force. I believe it was like a team decision, but I was like, we really should, like
Right.
Alecks is the right guy. Yeah,
I
yeah,
see.
yeah. And there wasn't also I believe there wasn't also that many people to choose from in Singapore. So Alex was kind of like the hands down the guy to pick, but also at the same time I was like, please, please, please take him. I was like happy that he was gonna join us. So that was kind of, and of course Alex himself was happy, because then that was like Alex and Moxie was working like really super hard throughout their careers to go pro. And this was finally happening for a Singaporean team, and it was going to be the 5 of us, which are the 5 players that is basically like the best players in Singapore all put together. Like with a superstar team back in Singapore, back when BOOT was formed. Like it was really the superstar Singapore team. Every player inside the team had like would not lose 1-on-1 to another Singaporean player. So yeah, that was basically it.
Yeah, definitely. Like it was the best from the
Hmm.
Singaporean region.
Yeah, yeah, the
And
very very best. Yeah.
it sort of remained the best of the best for the entire tenure of that roster. Now, we sort of covered BOOT just prior, when we were talking about it at ROG Masters 2016. I did have one more question about that, though, because
Yep.
obviously you weren't just BOOT, you were BOOT Dreamscape. So
Yep.
what was the idea behind keeping Dreamscape? Was that just part of the deal? Like, we want to keep part of our history when we move into this roster?
Well, actually, yeah, because BOOT still had their Chinese team, and if we went under BOOT, it would be like BOOT.Singapore or something,
Yeah,
which was
boot.sg or something.
yeah, which was kind of lame for us, because we still wanted to use the team Dreamscape name. Like the Dreamscape name was like for me, the Dreamscape name really meant something. It still really means something to me.
Of course.
And I was like, hey, let's keep the Dreamscape name, and like everybody was kind of okay with that, because like we basically like grinded out 2016 with the Dreamscape name, being just like part-time players and being like basically top 4 in Asia still. And it was actually like, it was a huge deal for us to keep that name, and we're like, okay, let's just keep it. And they were like, okay, let's just keep it, but then we also had to put BOOT in the front. And BOOT was B.O.O.T dash D with the bracket
Fucking
S,
nightmare,
the other
man.
bracket S, then scape. It was crazy. Because BOOT also had like a really weird fucking name. So I mean, we managed to keep it. It was okay for the sake of history and like the culture that we had as a team. Like Dreamscape is that lineup that is kind of like super skilled and able to do a lot of damage, but and also coming from Singapore, like a country that basically has non-existent esports scene, it was like something. It was a big deal for us. So yeah.
Yeah. It did result in that nightmare name, though.
Yeah,
That
for the
like
casters,
nightmare
right?
name and abbreviation. Like every time I casted your game, or like, because at that time I used to like make note stocks, right? I don't do it so much now because I feel like I just talk about Asian Counter-Strike enough that I
Yeah,
am
yeah.
up to date with everything. But like when I had to do research, I would like write B.O.O.T because I'm like a really particular person in that I want to write the name correctly. So I would do that,
Yeah.
and then yeah, it was like that dash, and then the square bracket, little d, square bracket, capital S, and then like
The brackets were huge, man.
I was just like, why is this a thing? This is the ugliest name I've ever seen. Anyways, I still for some reason for me like saying BOOT Dreamscape is like one of those things where even when you stopped having Dreamscape in the name, like I know there was a period later on where Dreamscape was dropped from the org name.
Yeah.
I still said BOOT Dreamscape. It just was like something that came off my tongue. Every time I said BOOT, I just had to say Dreamscape
Yeah,
after
so
it.
it made an impression, right?
Yeah, of
So that was the
course.
idea. Yeah, BOOT Dreamscape. It sounded nice, like saying it. BOOT Dreamscape. BOOT Dreamscape. Hey, it's
Yeah.
cool, right? But then when you have to fucking like write it out, type it out, it's a fucking
Or think
nightmare.
about what it even means. It was like, what is this?
Yeah.
Look, anyway, it's fine. So once you join BOOT Dreamscape, you play quite a lot of sort of minor Asian tournaments. There wasn't any of these big sort of, I say international, but I mean like international domestic Asian tournaments. There wasn't like any really noticeable results. I do just want to get your sense initially of what your first impressions of this team sort of were and what your impressions with this org were. Like, how are things going early on in the BOOT Dreamscape kind of era?
So like there wasn't any big tournaments in early 2017, which was super unfortunate because that was when like honeymoon period, teams just put together, everybody's like super motivated. You're like really gung ho, right? But back then I remember us being like really strong. We were actually really like we were actually really good. Like we were winning some like um good teams in like land and not land, sorry, like winning local lands, I believe. And at the same time we were also doing really well in preg, and we were super happy with where we were um with the start of BOOT Dreamscape. So much so to the point where it's like sometime in June, I think sometime in June, we started to get like the idea of doing a gaming house, and that was kind of when Alecks was benched. So at the start it was really great. If there were more tournaments during that period of time, I think Alecks wouldn't have been benched, to be honest. Like this
Okay.
is the story that kind of intertwines. So yeah.
All right. Well, why don't we jump into that? Because that's what I wanted to talk about next anyway. The fact that Alecks was benched from the roster. So, what are the reasons why he was benched? Like, to me, it looks really weird. You know, I always look at a team and I think, okay, if they've just added a player, and this is something that's
Mhm.
very poignant at the moment within the ANZ region, there's a big roster shuffle going on at the moment, is
Yep.
like, if you're going to add a player and then, like, 3 to 6 months later, just remove him again. Like, what's the point, you know? So, to me, I look at this as quite a strange choice. If you were so hyped, so excited to play with Alecks, as you mentioned a little bit earlier on, and then 6 months later, he gets removed from the team, like, something surely must have gone wrong here, right?
Well, this was something that was very unfortunate. Um, but basically, what happened was that in June 2017, we decided, okay, let's move into a gaming house and then like really go big, really live the life of like a pro gamer, and then like stay boot camp, stay in the gaming house, stay together, sleep together, do everything together, uh, make it look like a real professional team, right? And this was actually panning out pretty well. DSM was gonna move in with us as well, and it was gonna be huge. It was gonna be big, but because of a lack of like real good results in early 2017, Alecks back then, I think this is pretty personal for him. But I think right now it's okay for me to talk about it. I mean, if he gets mad at me, then I'm sorry, Alecks. Okay, in advance. But basically, he decided to stop pursuing esports as a career because of his girlfriend back then. And he kind of like just said like, okay, I don't think I'm gonna be able to do this. I need to, because back then our salary was like 1,000 a month, 1,000 Sing dollars a month, which is similar to Australian dollars, right?
Yeah,
Because
it's not
Sing
a
AOD
lot
is really,
though, right?
yeah, it's
Like,
like 0.97 or some shit.
you can't
Yeah.
live off of that though. Is the main.
Yeah, in Singapore you cannot live
Yeah.
off that. And Alecks at that point of time, I believe, was 27.
Yeah.
So he was actually pretty like he's in the eyes of society in Singapore at 27, you should be earning maybe 3,000 Sing dollars a month. Uh, and Alecks also has a pretty okay like family background. So for like his parents, I think were okay, but like his like social like his girlfriend was not, I believe. But it has something to do with like his relationship status that like kind of forced him to like he benched himself. He wasn't benched. He stepped down,
Okay.
and it was super disappointing for me. Like my personal like even thinking about it right now, like if Alecks had stuck with us, moved into a gaming house, we would have won Dreamhack Masters Malmo anyway. I'm pretty sure. And the qualifier, I mean, and then if we were went to Sweden to Malmo, and then we have done like really good there because then we would be like we had a real caller. Alecks was calling for us. I believe there's actually a tournament that we attended with that boot lineup, which was China top. I don't think it was where Fnatic Academy was there, and then Bented's first tournament with Tyloo. Uh, I'm not sure if you actually found that doing your research, but we actually played there and got top four. So I
Mm.
knew Alecks was like a capable caller, a capable player, and I already had like good expectations of our team. And I knew that moving into a gaming house and everything would be like super beneficial for us, and we would do even better for the rest of the year because we signed, I believe, what was a 1 year contract with Boot, or maybe 2 year contract with Boot, and then like within a year we wanted to go as far as we can. But Alecks wasn't on board with that. I was super disappointed. This was like kind of the thing that really like this is one of the things that whenever I think about, I just kind of feel bad. Like there's some sense of melancholy about it around it, like kind of
Yeah.
sad.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I knew that if Alecks was with us during that time, and went to a gaming house, and Benkai and Splashske, I believe, was doing their study break in June. Um, it would have been super good. We were played so well, but it just never happened. And I guess like I mean like no point like being too sad about it. But
Yeah.
whenever I think about it, it is pretty sad. Yeah.
What could have been, I suppose. Obviously, you add Tommy to the roster, who is someone that would continue to sort of crop up in these top Singaporean teams for, the rest of, I guess, Counter-Strike's history, even up to this point. He sort of still seems to be kicking around.
Mhm.
Anyway, so after Alecks is removed, you sort of mentioned this DreamHack Masters Malmo Asia Qualifier. And to me, like, this is one of the first real results that BOOT has as a roster. Like, you had some pretty good results as Dreamscape, but under the BOOT name, you actually get the win in this tournament. And this is not like playing against shitters in the Asian region and, winning an SCA qualifier. This is actually the whole Asia qualifier. This is including ANZ. This is including China. So Tyloo was there. Vici was there. Mongols was there. Rekka was there. Greyhound was there. Although, admittedly, this was before Greyhound really got to that sort of level where they were quite good. But these are fucking sick names back in the day. So this is a fucking awesome result for BOOT. And despite the fact that you've obviously lost Alecks, even with Tommy coming into this roster, I mean, this must have been like, shit, boys, we're like doing it,
Yeah. Yeah, like so like that result was literally like a month, I think, or within the same month that we moved into the gaming house.
Yeah.
There was this like super hype video about of our winning moment, like literally like Splashske jumped onto Tommy, like like he was like bear hugging him. It was like super cool. It was huge for us. Like for me personally, like it was a fucking dream come true because DreamHack, like IEM events, ESL events,
Mm.
and DreamHack. DreamHack is like the big thing in FPS, like in any FPS game, Battlefield, whatever game it is that has like a FPS genre. Even like in League of Legends and MOBAs and stuff like that, DreamHack is huge. And to be able to like attend DreamHack, to qualify for DreamHack was such a big thing for me and for the rest of the team because it was like I all the hard work that we've basically put in as amateurs to right now what we are considered, I mean like back then was considered semi pros, moving into a gaming house and attempting a full pro type of lifestyle and qualifying, beating like some of the very best teams in Asia. I mean prior to like we in like that tournament run was pretty crazy, right? We 2-0 Signature Thailand team,
Mm.
good players. Greyhound, 2-1 Vici, and then 2-1 Tyloo to qualify for that DreamHack Mama. So it was insane. It was huge for us. We were like, okay, we finally make, like, it was like the Cinderella run, right? It was insane for us, and to make it work and to actually be able to attend there to beat Tailu. I remember beating Tailu, like, I believe the last map was Train, or was it Cobblestone? I was
Should
Train
say.
on the last map. Yeah, yeah. Like, it was it was like huge for us. Like, we played like the tournament. I believe like the tournament of our lives in that particular run. We really wanted to win so bad because we put in so much hard work, in the gaming house to get there. And when it panned out well for us, when all our hard work like came to fruition, it was I have no words for it, man. It was an amazing moment. I'll never forget about that, really.
So a big result obviously means you qualify for DreamHack Masters Malmo, but before you
Hmm.
get to Malmo, you're playing in this World Cyber Arena 2017 Asia Pacific tournament,
Yeah.
which is again a pretty decent result for you. This time you actually came second behind the Chiefs, which was the Chiefs that actually represented ANZ at IEM Sydney 2017. So it was the best team in ANZ at the time. Tux, Inns, Malta, Alistair, and Pex. But you still managed to sort of outplace the majority or all of the Asian teams at this competition. You outplaced Greyhound. So it seems like, you're really starting to kind of reinforce this level of play that you've just brought in Masters Malmo. It kind of makes you think, okay, well, Malmo qualifiers wasn't really a fluke. And you've been able
Hmm.
to sort of go back to back. So was this kind of a big result for you as well? Or was it a bit more of just like, I mean, that was okay. We qualified for WCA because it was the top two teams go through and you were in the top two teams, but it wasn't quite as big of a deal as the Malmo quals?
Mm, okay, I think to put some context into WCA, the truth about BOOT is that BOOT was never a full-time team. BOOT was a full-time team 2 months of a year. Like, in every year, there's 12 months. There's 2 months that BOOT is basically a full-time team, and those 2 months is when the players that were studying get their study break,
Right.
namely Splashske and Benkai. So in June, like, it was like the study break for Splashske and Benkai because it was summer, right? Like summer break, I
Yep.
believe. So it was actually we could practice like 9-10 hours a day. We had no problem like fixing issues, like being a real pro team. But I think going into July, WCA, we were kind of like riding off the momentum of winning, and we also weren't putting as much time in. I believe this was what happened because I mean, it's been like 3 years since then, um, but we weren't. I believe what we would consider like 100% prepared playing the WCA. So we were okay, like getting like a second place against a team that we don't play against, which is the Chiefs, right? The AUNZ team. And it was a bit unfortunate because I believe like we kind of like choked a little bit in WCA. We could have won like I remember we wanted to win like big money because WCA was like huge amount of prize pool. But um I guess this is also another story of like the capabilities of a part-time team. I guess this is the way that I'll put it. So yeah.
Yep. Fair enough. So then we move into DreamHack Masters Malmo, which is the big one. And it's interesting for you to say that like your team's maybe a full-time team for only 2 months of the year. So in this instance, I'm assuming it was probably like June, July, because based on the results that I'm seeing, and we'll talk about them as we go, the results do actually dip quite substantially toward the end of 2017. And one of those results is at DreamHack Masters Malmo. So from my perspective, I would say like you guys go into this with realistic expectations that you are, an Asian team that isn't necessarily like expected to dominate or do anything particularly amazing at DreamHack Masters Malmo. But what you
Hmm.
probably don't expect is to lose 16-2, 16-2, and then be out of the tournament, which is what happened against SK and Cloud9. So,
Yep.
I mean, was this like a come down after that high that you had in the qualifier?
I think for an Asian team to go into any other, like, to join the tournament in any other region, chances are, and probably the Asian team would put like at least 2 weeks or like a month of really really hard work prior to playing the actual land itself, and then already preparing for the possible tournament opponents that you would play against. But for us in boot, that never happened, because we wanted to do bootcamp in. Wait, we did do bootcamp in Europe prior to Malmo. We did bootcamp in Denmark. We went there like a week ahead of the tournament schedule itself, or a week and a half, and we did like do practice against the European teams and stuff like that. It actually just like popped out in my head. Practice there was actually okay. Like we did practice against some like really good teams. I believe we did practice against Heroic back then. Or was it not Heroic? It was another, like it was under another team name. They had Snappy, I believe. I can't really remember. And we also played practice against Navi and stuff like that. I remember very clearly that I one dig simple and I took a screenshot. It was super funny. I lost that screenshot now though, so it's kind of sad. But we were actually doing pretty alright in prac. But the moment like we had to play against like the teams in such a like high level environment, it just seemed like we could never get our game going. Like I believe we started T in on both games, and we just basically only had one round or 2 rounds or something, and just never managed to play our own game. And as much like effort as we like put into like preparing for Malmo, it just really didn't pan out well for us. And also in BOOT, right, with the with the with Alecks stepping down in Tommy's edition, we never had an in-game leader. All the
Right.
way until like next year, basically. But we'll get to that when we talk about it. So
Because
yeah.
I guess you hadn't like moved into that role at that point.
No. At that
Yeah.
point of time, I had not. Yeah. So it was kind of stupid because we just kind of put like the toughest role onto our best player, thinking that our best player could take the toughest role because he's the best player on the team.
Yeah.
So yeah, kind of stupid, bad decision. End up with a terrible T side on like in the entirety of Malmo. Like I think we played 30 rounds of T side, we only got 4. That was it. And then on the
Yeah.
CT it was just momentum.
You got
and
no
we
no
just
rounds on
basically-
CT.
Yeah, we got fucked. So yeah.
I mean, look, I hate to bring up bad memories, but I've just been looking at these results and I thought this was kind of funny. You went to this tournament and you got a grand total of 9 frags over 2 maps. So
Oh shit.
just thought that was something funny to sort of just talk about.
I didn't even look at it that in depth. I always say like, guys, we got 4 rounds out of 32, man. We did okay.
No, you didn't.
It's a good percentage.
Yeah.
It's more than 10%, guys. It's
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, but I never saw that I only had 9 kills. But
6
yeah,
in one
suck-
map and 3 in the other.
suck the
anyways.
huge fucking donger, bro. Pepe
Yeah.
hands.
Look, it is what it is.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe a bad result for BOOT at that tournament, but yeah,
Horrible result. Remember?
not the end of the world. You know, it's an international tournament. You're probably expected to get wrecked. You haven't been overseas in a while.
Mm.
Should come back to Asia, and theoretically, you should win everything still. It should be fine. But problem is, when you do come back to Asia, you don't win everything. So that's where things, I think, really start to come a little bit more problematic for BOOT. Now, we'll talk about Zen Esports Network League. If anyone remembers, this was sort of another Asia domestic league that ESL ran back in the day. And I really enjoyed this league, and I think a lot of players did as well. You guys didn't play in Season 1, though, did you? So do you remember like what happened there? You just didn't qualify or didn't try to qualify? What happened with that?
So Zen League Season 2, right?
Mm-hmm.
I believe this tournament, I believe Moxie was on holiday.
For Season 1.
For season, oh, okay, sorry, for Season 1, we didn't play in it. I'm not sure why. Might have been like a scheduling conflict, something along those lines. I'm really not sure.
Maybe there was
Zen League
invites
Season 1?
only. Having a look back now. It was
Yeah,
June.
I actually forgot to look into this.
It was like June in 2017.
So Zen League Season 1, Asia qualifiers was played March to April. I'm not sure why we didn't play this. Did we lose in the last chance qualifier? We might have.
The Shootout Season 3. You did play in it, actually. You came 5th to 8th, now that I'm looking. So you got knocked out by 7-6-4-2, which was that Thai team.
Oh yeah, okay, I remember this. It was pretty fucked up because from what I recall, those Thailand guys were just like going ham on us. Yeah, cigarettes was fucking us up. Yeah. Okay, I remember this. I remember there was this
Cigarettes
highlight.
at the time was a fucking beast. I remember watching him play sometimes, and I was like, "What the fuck? This guy has to be hacking." Like, I think I watched a map where he dropped like 50 frags on Mirage in regulation. I can't remember who it was against, but I was like, "That's not legit. Like, there is no way you can do that." Anyways, that's beside the point.
Yeah, so we lost to 7642 like really early in the year actually. Yeah, so I think this was kind of like a time where it's like we just were just getting together. We're not that good yet. We're good on certain maps, but on certain maps we're still pretty like really weak. Like Overpass is never a Singaporean map. That's the truth of it. Overpass is Singapore's worst map by far, compared to any other map. And I think like in the series, the last map went to Overpass and we just like basically choked on it. Boot had a lot of choking issues, like since forever, so it wasn't a surprise that we didn't like qualify for season 1. Uh, but yeah, that was basically it for season 1. I think we just failed the qualification process.
Hmm.
Hmm?
Unfortunate, I guess.
Yeah, I
So
guess like not much to say about it. We just lost.
yeah. So well, okay. Well, let's talk about season 2 then. You go into season 2, and this is where things actually do sort of become a little bit more of a problem, I would say,
Mhm.
because like yeah, you had that bad result overseas, but theoretically you're supposed to come back to Asia and do pretty well. Then
Yep.
you play in season 2 and you've placed 5th in the round robin, like you don't make it to the LAN finals. You're placing below NASA, below Rekka, below Firepower. These are all teams that you were sort of expected to beat and teams that you had beaten quite comprehensively and consistently in the past. So this is like a bit of a downward spiral, it seems like. Is this just because like you guys are not playing as often, right? Obviously, you said you're not a full-time team at this point anymore. And Styron seemed to stand in. Like you mentioned, Moxie was maybe on holidays or something like that. So a lot of issues maybe for this Zen League Season 2 roster.
Yeah, so I believe what happened was after Dreamhack Malmo, Moxie went on a 2-week holiday um in Europe. I think I cannot for the life of me remember what happened and why Moxie wasn't playing, because it seems like he wasn't playing for the entire month of September. Yeah, okay, so he did not play with us for like maybe a good 3 weeks. I believe he was on holiday, if I recall correctly. And well, basically playing with stand is never gonna be fun, right? Um, Also, the stand-in was like we swapped between stand-ins. We had Alecks and then Styron was playing for the rest of the time, and it just I think like the best way I can chalk it up to, like the best reason I can chalk it up to like why we didn't perform that well was basically just because we had a stand-in. Also coming out from DreamHack Masters, like we were super beat. Like our confidence was like in the all-time low because we basically got 4 rounds in like 32, and it was actually a huge thing for us to go there and fail that badly. And we all sat down and just like, what the fuck happened? We got destroyed. And we came back like after the tournament. We didn't practice or anything. We didn't stay longer to practice or stuff like that. We just went there and came back. And then Moxie went on holiday. I believe was on holiday. It's either holiday or National Army Reservice, like
Right.
national service, like Army Reservice, which is he has to go back for like maybe 2 weeks or something. It was one of those two things. And playing with a stand-in for Zen League and not qualifying for it was just like, I think it's a result of us just like basically it was we're done riding that high. We met reality. We got like slapped by SK and Cloud9, like come back down to earth, and then we landed back in Asia and we're like, okay, we're not doing too good. And then we just do what we can, which wasn't good enough. And I think basically that was it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it sort of compounded upon itself when you went to Extremesland as well. So this was Extremesland 2017 after having a really good result there in 2016 as Dreamscape. You come into 2017, you place 5th to 8th, you get knocked out in the quarterfinals, which, I mean, it's not that bad of a result to be fair, but it's not like a great result, and it's certainly not a top team in Asia kind of a result either. Unfortunately, you did get placed against Flash Gaming in that quarterfinal, who was the team
Mm-hmm.
that would inevitably go on to actually win the tournament. So maybe there's an argument to be made that what you had a bad bracket, or was there other extenuating circumstances around that tournament?
I think going into okay. So another thing was actually in September when we were playing the Zen League tournament, right? This is okay. So just to put some context into what I'm about to talk about, right? Me and Splashske, we were the closest in the team. I treated him like an actual younger brother, and he treated me like an actual like elder brother. And then we're super tight, we super close, talking to each other like 24/7. And we had a huge argument on the September 11. I just remembered because it's like September 11. Like
That's a
that date
date.
is,
That's a date
yeah,
you
that's the date,
remember,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So me and Splashske had this huge argument. Uh, it ended up really badly for the two of us. Our relationship at that like basically was never the same after that argument, I believe, and it also affected the morale of the team, I believe, because it was kind of like it was a little bit childish of the both of us, I think, and we were staying together. We've been staying together for 3 months already, right? And we were in the gaming house together, and this was like huge. This was massive, like in the internal thing, like internally, because like we imploded kind of, and it just didn't show on the outside. Everything looked fine, but actually we were really not that stable at that point of time. Um,
Was it an
which is
argument
also
like to do with the game? Like, was it part of the team? I don't want to pry too much if you don't want to talk about it, but was it
it was actually pretty personal.
right?
It wasn't like so much about the team. Like relationships in the team was really strained towards the end of our like staying in the gaming house.
That's not a
It
surprise,
was
knowing how gaming houses usually are.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like that's why this is also kind of why like right now I have this like stigma towards the Singapore scene, which is, I always say this, right? Singaporean players do not lack the IQ, they lack the EQ, to fix problems together and to become good teammates and stuff like that. So
Right.
yeah, that huge argument kind of caused a bit of problems for us, which was also kind of, I believe it was a good reason, like a good part of the reason why we started dipping in performance, and that goes as well for Extremesland 2017. We played against like we had like starting off the tournament we were already not that good. We went like 30 rounds against a Indian team, which is, to be fair, the Indian scene has never been great. So going like 16-14 against the Indian team for us at that point of time was kind of like, in a sense, we weren't expecting to go so close with the Indian team.
Yeah.
Um, and then after we play Eclipse, like, okay, this Chinese team, I have no idea. Like this is a team with Bottle and Shot Up High and Ayaya, right? Like a bunch of like aim lords. And these guys basically, like, we watched the demo. They're like on Inferno. They're like, okay, they always take mid control like this. They throw a smoke first. They do it systematically. And then when they play land against us, they just basically ran Diggity every fucking round, or jungle every
Yep.
round.
Yep.
Like just
Classic,
balls out. Like
where the
just
Asian CS meme comes from.
yeah, just really fucking W into my face and shit. And it was just super surprising. We were caught super off guard and we lost that. And if we had won that, we probably wouldn't have played Flash in the quarters, and probably had a better playoff run, because Flash at that point in time was insane,
Hmm.
right? They were already so good back then with Attacker and Summer and like basically like the other Asian team that would do really good. I think they went on to win that event,
They did,
if
yeah.
I recall correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so wasn't surprised to be stopped in the quarters, especially considering that we lost to Flash. Um, but basically, I think basically that was it. Right? Our performance dip was due to like internal issues, and also like unfortunate brackets for Elands 2017. Um, should have done better in groups, I guess. So yeah, but Eclipse also went on to fight Flash in the finals. So I guess kind of we lost to the top. I remember us saying like, well, we lost to the first and second of the tournament, so it's not. I guess those guys were on form and on point during that tournament, and we just kind of left it at there, I think.
Yeah. All right, well, we'll move on to the Asia Minor that you played at the end of 2017 as well, which was the Eleague Asia Minor. Now, this was another pretty bad performance from BOOT. Like, it just continues to like be a downward spiral, and this is pretty much the end of it going into the Christmas break from 2017 to 2018. And in this particular tournament, you came dead last in what was a minor, so it's perhaps probably the most important tournament that you played all year. You played against Tyloo, Flash, and Tainted Minds in Group B. Now, it's a minor, so you're going to have some pretty tough games. And to be fair, I look at this and I think those are some pretty fucking rough games. But losing 0-2 to Tainted Minds, and that Tainted Minds roster, which was, never really amounted to anything in the ANZ region, apart from like overall kind of disappointment in that they never got anywhere. Like, they were a lot of individually very good players, and it looked like it should be a super team, but they never actually got anywhere. To me, that's like a result where I go, okay, well, BOOT sort of seems to be really just struggling. I don't know that there's a whole lot to really say about this minor that hasn't already been said, but I feel like we have to bring it up because it's a minor.
Well, we basically traveled from Extremesland in Shanghai straight to Korea, I think. And because I think this invite was kind of last minute. I remember there was a whole like petition thing going on about this tournament being invite only because there wasn't open qualifiers for this particular one. I remember. There was like a lot of teams that like signed a petition, DSN signed a petition, and stuff like that. It was purely invite only for a minor, which a lot of people are not happy about. Because obviously it's a minor, right? You're gonna have open qualies and stuff like that. And we got invited, like, of course our team got invited and we had to go, like, we were basically a month away from home, I think, or maybe like 2-3 weeks away from home. It was not pretty for us. It was not great for us. Like, we're not a professional team in the capacity where it's like, like we can be abroad for like a month and then go back and then we'll be okay. We were kind of like, like, it wasn't great for us to travel like from one event to the next, like, directly, I believe, which was, I believe, what we did, because I remember we did something along those lines, like traveling to Korea and stuff like that. But playing against Flash again, which just won the Extremesland, which we just lost to, was not fun. Definitely did not do well there. Attacker was super on point, like throughout his tenure in Flash. And he was just like this crazy aim lord, right? He was just like DD version 2, I think, slightly better DD, something like that, like younger DD. And he was like super on point. Playing against him was never fun. And then this Tainted Minds game, I remember it was a fucking shit show. Like, I remember this one really, really, really big round where it's like, I'm the A anchor on Mirage. I push Palace. I go to ramp. I'm behind Yam and the guy planting the bomb, and then fucking Yam just turns around and headshots me with the AWP while he was posting CT. I had no idea why he turned around. I have no clue. And that was like up to like, I had nightmares of that round for like maybe like 6 months or something. Like, I still remember really clearly that happening. Like, it was just not a good tournament, like, for us. Like, this last 3 months of 2017 in BOOT was super bad for us. Like, everybody was not putting in the right effort. We had a lot of problems in the team. It wasn't just me and Splashske arguing. The two bands, Moxie and Benkai, also had some issues. I have no idea like what happened, but it was a weird time. Thinking back on it, I feel like I basically kind of erased a good portion of it from my like data bank, because it was just like a shit time in my life, I feel. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I was going to talk about a couple more of these events just prior to we get to the point that I'm about to talk about, but we are, really starting to go a little bit over time here. So I'm going to speed things up. I'm going to skip the WESG 2017 APAC Finals, which was one you finished third behind Order and MVP. Not really a big deal. But let's move into March 2018. So we skip all of that Christmas period. We skip some of the early tournaments in 2018. And we get to the point where Moxie departs BOOT. So first of all, obviously, Moxie leaving, or was he replaced? That's the first question. And how is that all sort of kind of panning out? Because in the HLTV article, it sort of states that he didn't re-sign with the team. So from what it looks like to the outside, he basically just decided, no, I'm out. I'm done.
Okay, so I guess what we had with BOOT was a one-year contract, I guess. And okay, so you remember the whole NDO thing? NDO Esports?
I don't think so, no.
Well, basically it was a thing where Volk, I'm not sure if you know him, like Volk, VOLKY, his guy on Twitter, right? He wanted to do like an esports org with Doc, right? D0CC, that Doc. And they want to do like an esports team with Doc, Percy, Moxie, and two other players, and I think I think they had like one more player, and they were searching for a last. This organization was supposed to be based in like Shenzhen and stuff, like in China,
Right.
and it was like Moxie decided to. I believe what happened was Moxie decided to go for that, so he departed BOOT, didn't sign with BOOT again, and he wanted to, and basically I think he kind. I'm pretty sure he kind of got tired of all the fucking drama in the team as well. Like, cause
Yeah.
it was like super stupid. Um, we were, we always like constantly had arguments. Practice was not fun. Um, like I remember this one time, like Moxie, like in practice in the gaming house, like Moxie, like because we fucked up, Moxie got knifed. He just basically walked off from his PC. So it was not fun for us. We had like a fair deal of like problems in team, and I think he was done with that. And like he seeked like greener pastures in NDO, which made so much sense because then that team would have like good salaries and stuff like that. Full time pro, he would have to deal with us like being like boot being children, like man childs in the
Yeah.
team all the time, and like he gets to play in a full proper professional team. So I think that that made a lot of sense to me. um I remember WSG 2017 APAC finals, right? After the APAC finals, me and Moxie, I believe we both flew to Serbia because back then we both had girlfriends from Serbia. Really funny. So we kind of went
Random.
there for like a holiday, and then like I was talking to him and everything, and like I was like telling him to stay, but it just never happened. He just left. So winter comes along. So yeah.
Yeah. Winter coming along. Now that's the other interesting part of this discussion.
Oh, this is the fun part.
Where do
This
you
is
get Winter
my
from? Because
fun.
he's from Kazakhstan, is it? Or I think
So
it's Kazakhstan.
Alekhan, right? Alekhan, right?
Mm.
Inter, right? He is a Kazakhstani. He wanted to go pro in CS, and he wanted to do it in Asia because obviously there's an easier way to do it.
Right.
So when he was choosing where to study uni, he specifically chose Singapore so he could join BOOT, so he could start a pro career. Believe it or not.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. So dude literally like came from Kazakhstan to Singapore to study just so he could join like a Singaporean pro team. So that was that. He was playing in the Singapore scene. He was super sharp, like a step ahead of everyone else that was outside of Dreamscape back then, and also a boot back then. And eventually, when Moxie left, like we are like, hey, we really need a new player that can commit to us. And then like the name Winter popped along, and we also knew that he wasn't Singaporean, and because he has been already playing in the CIS region, like in Kazakhstan, local lands and stuff like that. So he actually had better experience than most Singaporean players that we had to pick from. So he decided, hey, let's take Winter. Why not? He's studying in Singapore. We have him for like maybe a year and a half to 2 years, and he plays good CS as well, like super sharp. If you actually seen Winter play, which I believe you have,
I did. Yep.
he's a fucking turret. Sit him in the sit him in an angle, he'll kill that guy. Even if he pops out from an angle like 90 degrees away, it's insane. He's really super like his reactions are super good, like as a player. So yeah, when he popped up, we took him. That was kind of where like this roster of me, Benkai, Tommy, Winter, and Splashske was the fucking roster that had basically everything, I believe, to become like a really, really good Asian team. So yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because going into the IEM Sydney Asia qualifier, I was going to say, like, I casted that tournament, and this is one of the few tournaments that I sort of felt like, okay, actually, Boot again is kind of back on the rise. And one of the things that I said, I looked back at it when I was doing research. I watched some of the VOD, and in it, I said, this is the best looking Boot that I've ever seen with Winter coming into this roster, right? And that was really quite soon after. It was like March when Moxie left and Winter joined, and then
Mhm.
April when this qualifier happened. You actually ended up qualifying top three. It was the top three which would qualify through.
Yep.
But a big result, of course. And it seems like, was this like a revitalizing time maybe for Boot with Winter coming into the roster? Did you have that extra sort of emphasis on, okay, let's actually try and make this work?
Okay, I remember this. This was pretty specific because what happened is when Moxie left and Winter joined, and I believe we had a few officials like really soon after Moxie left, And I remember there was this one game that we lost. I think it was a best of one or best of three, and we lost it. We were still running in contention for the tournament. I think we dropped the lower brackets or something like that. And we were on TeamSpeak, 5 of us, after the game. And the tension in the team was insane. Like, I think Benkai and Splashske had a huge argument in TeamSpeak, like just shouting at each other. And I was like, okay, it's good. Like, it was super funny because Winter was with us for a week, and then immediately we had this had this argument. And Winter was like, bro, what the fuck is going on? And Tommy is generally like a pretty chill guy, so it was just like listening. So it was just like me, Splashske, and Benkai just like trashing shit out. I wasn't so much so like about the argument, but I was just like kind of mediating. I'm not sure what actually happened that caused such a huge like like a discord within the team, right? It was actually pretty big. But after we trashed it out, and I was like, okay, guys, we just changed the roster. Let's. I mean, it's kind of mean to say it right now as it is, right? But back then, I told them, guys, let's just put all the blame on Moxie, and he has left the team. We're now in a good, nice environment. We're gonna start winning. We're gonna do really good. And that was kind of where like the team's morale is kind of like restored to like maybe like 100%, and we just kind of kept it there like throughout I think 2018, I believe. So
Yeah, I mean, this seemed to be the best year for BOOT.
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, just
yeah,
touching
definitely.
on the IEM Sydney qualifier, you actually beat Flash in the lower bracket final 2-0. So a team that you had definitely struggled with over the course
Hmm.
of the previous year
Yep,
seems to
yep.
have no longer been a thorn in your side so much. And you were that third place team, which, like, when I look back at it, you've got Tyloo, MVP, which, by the way, MVP had started to get good by that point.
Yeah, yeah,
Flash
yeah.
and BOOT were like the top four. It seemed like a 4-horse race for a 3-team qualifier. And I actually thought BOOT was probably the fourth place team in that race. But
Yep.
yet you guys were able to beat Flash. So it seemed like you just sort of
Hmm.
made it happen and turned things around and managed to make it to IEM Sydney. So that's one good result to start things off in 2018. Seems like 2018 is looking up. Then we go to ESL Pro League Season 7, which is where we had that Asia final, if you remember, in Sydney. This was like really cool back in the day. These were like the good
Oh
times
yeah,
in
yeah, yeah.
Asian Counter-Strike where
Yeah, that was super fun, man.
there was actually an ESL Pro League Asia. So I think it was like the top 4 teams from Asia and the top 4 teams from ANZ came to this event, or maybe it was actually, now that I'm looking at it, it's 5 teams from Asia and 3 teams from ANZ that played at this. There was 2 teams from SEA, 3 teams from the China group, which was
Hmm.
technically MVP, Mongols, and Scars, because
Yep.
for some reason, like that's the way the regions were split. And then it was you and Signature from SEA. And this was an event where like you didn't perform that well. Like you came 5th, 6th, and I guess it was a disappointing result. But Bulbasaur was standing in for Benkai. It wasn't your full core roster. I think Alecks had just come on as the coach as well. So there was a lot of maybe moving and shaking. But give me your TLDR, your thoughts on this particular event, because I have very fond memories of the Season 7 Asia Finals.
Okay, I believe Alex joined sometime along the lines of Moxie leaving along with Winter.
Mhm.
So I do believe the IEM Sydney qualifier that we won in against Flash like was also thanks to Alex helping us out as like a six man, right, a coach. And when we qualified for ESL Pro League season 7, Benkai unfortunately had uh examinations. Like he had 2 exams, right? He had 2 papers to take on the weekend that the the event was happening. So unfortunately he could not play. We had to get someone, which of course is Bulbasaur, to like stand in for him. And playing with a stand-in is never fun. It's kind of sad as well. It like okay, every time like every detour that we've had in boot was a huge like it was a hit to us and our morale and our like kind of like our passion and motivation for the game, because it sucks that like one out of 3 events we have to play with stand-in, you know what I mean? Or we 1 out of 3 events like we play with a different lineup or different roster and stuff like that. Like even throughout 2017 we also like half the year in we changed out Alecks, and then half a year later we Moxie left the team, and then like literally a month later again we had to play with Bulbasaur, which was stand-in. it was kind of sad, and obviously we weren't at 100% because back then that was when Benkai was really like the carrying force of the team, right? That was when like in 2017 to 2018 was kind of where like everybody says like Benkai is the guy. Benkai is like what Blaze is, right? Vintage get right, and dude's super good, mechanically sound, does makes all the right decisions and stuff like that. So he was a huge part of the team, and to not have like your star player at a LAN event that you qualified with him for, it sucks. We definitely did not play well. I remember I remember the opening game we played against Greyhound. A lot of it was anti-stratting because we had so much info on the Greyhound guys, right? Like Arcast and stuff. Um, it was pretty okay to win the opener, and then like against Tainted Minds, we kind of just flopped out, I believe.
Yeah, it seems like Tainted Minds was really one of those teams that had your number regardless of what happened. Like that's the second result where they 2-0'd you for some reason. And again, like I said, they weren't even considered the top team in the ANZ region. Although, I mean, there was an argument around that time, but I think some of the results that they had has then reinforced since then that at the time they weren't one of the best. Yeah, and actually back on that Benkai point as well, like the way that I sort of look at Benkai was he was the Bentet before Bentet. Like he was the individual in the SEA region that everyone was like, this guy's fucking sick. He could be like someone that goes overseas. Now, he obviously never did it. Did the military service affect him? Did a bunch of these other extenuating services affect him?
I think he got an offer from Kings at one point in time.
That doesn't surprise me, but yeah, like that's what I'm saying. You know, he could have potentially moved somewhere.
It's just the Singaporean thing, right? Like suck, like what can you do? Suck a dick, right? Like.
Wasting time.